The massive holographic transmission crackled to life simultaneously across thousands of communication hubs. Quantum entanglement technology ensured that every sentient species in the Galactic Concordance would witness this moment with perfect synchronization. The Zarkax Imperium's supreme commander, Vornak the Unbroken, dominated the display, a towering reptilian figure whose very presence radiated centuries of martial tradition. His scaled skin gleamed with bioluminescent war markings, each intricate pattern telling a story of conquered civilizations. Cybernetic implants pulsed along his neck and cranial ridge, a testament to the Zarkax's belief that true perfection came through the fusion of biological supremacy and technological enhancement. Behind him, the bridge of the flagship Eternal Consequence stretched out, a cathedral of war, with holographic battle projections and thousands of crew members moving with mechanical precision. "Hear me, Galactic Concordance," Vornak's voice thundered, translated simultaneously into every known language and communication protocol. "Humanity's provisional status ends today. For 1,000 years, we have watched and waited. For 1,000 years, we have tolerated their presence. No more." The transmission showed a comprehensive war declaration, a document so detailed it included projected casualty rates, resource redistribution plans, and a minute-by-minute conquest timeline. Each word was a calculated instrument of psychological warfare, designed to break the spirit before the first shot was fired. In the Global Solutions Institute's primary conference room, Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat surrounded by a team that looked anything but concerned. Her dark eyes reflected the holographic transmission, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Around her, a diverse group of experts from every conceivable discipline watched with a curious mixture of anticipation and something else. Dr. Marcus Chen, a quantum systems expert, leaned back in his chair and whispered to the biomimetic engineer next to him, "Right on schedule." The words seemed impossible. Right on schedule. A war declaration. As Vornak continued his proclamation, detailing the complete dismantling of human infrastructure, the redistribution of Earth's resources, and the systematic elimination of human populations, something extraordinary began to happen in the conference room. A chuckle, soft at first, then growing. Dr. Rodriguez's shoulders began to shake. Her initial chuckle transformed into full-bodied laughter that seemed to carry both humor and something deeper, a profound understanding that the Zarkax couldn't comprehend. Her team joined her, not hysterically, not in panic, but with a collective mirth that suggested they were witnessing something remarkable. Across the global network, human response centers mirrored this reaction. In research stations on Mars, in underwater cities, in orbital habitats, in every human settlement, the response was the same: laughter. The galactic communication networks went silent. The Zarkax transmission continued, but the background noise of 1,000 civilizations processing this moment had vanished. Every species, every diplomatic channel, every intelligence analysis team was focused on one thing: humans, laughing at a declaration of total war. Vornak's speech stuttered. For the first time in his illustrious military career, the supreme commander of the most feared military force in the galaxy found himself confused. Dr. Rodriguez wiped a tear from her eye, her laughter settling into a knowing smile. "Gentlemen," she said to her team, "I believe our invitation has been accepted. The 1,000-year peace wasn't ending. It was about to be transformed." The holographic archives flickered to life, casting a spectral blue light across the Global Solutions Institute's historical research chamber. Dr. Arya Patel, the Institute's chief historiographer, began the presentation, a comprehensive journey through humanity's most critical transformation. The earliest images were brutal. Scenes of environmental devastation scrolled past. Burning rainforests, collapsing ice shelves, megacities choking under toxic skies. Wars raged across multiple continents, resource conflicts that seemed endless and increasingly desperate. By the mid-21st century, humanity teetered on the brink of total ecological and societal collapse. Most alien civilizations believed this would be humanity's end. The Zarkax had bet entire strategic models on humanity's self-destruction. Other galactic species had placed humanity in a mental category reserved for young, volatile civilizations, expected to burn out rather than evolve. They were wrong. The turning point came not from governments, not from military leaders, but from an unexpected coalition. The first image of change was a global education symposium held in 2153, a gathering that looked unremarkable but would become the catalyst for human transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's grandmother, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, stood at the center of that symposium. A systems ecologist and social psychologist, she presented a radical hypothesis. Humanity's survival depended not on technological advancement, but on a complete reimagining of human cognitive and social systems. Our current models of competition, of individual success, of resource management, they're fundamentally broken. Sofia Rodriguez had said. Her holographic image looked directly at the audience, her gaze intense and uncompromising. We don't need better technology. We need better ways of thinking. The symposium's attendees represented a diverse cross-section of human expertise: educators, neuroscientists, ecological engineers, quantum physicists, indigenous knowledge keepers, and social innovators. They weren't just discussing problems. They were designing a complete systemic reboot of human civilization. The Great Reconciliation of 2157 emerged from this crucible of thought. It wasn't a political movement or a technological breakthrough. It was a comprehensive redesign of human social infrastructure. Education transformed first. Learning became a lifelong collaborative process. Traditional competitive models were replaced by adaptive learning networks where knowledge was shared, not hoarded. Artificial intelligence wasn't used to replace human thinking, but to enhance collective problem-solving. Economic systems were next. The concept of individual wealth was reimagined as collective capability. Resources were managed through dynamic, adaptive networks that prioritized global ecological health and human potential over individual accumulation. Governance became a fluid, participatory process. Decision-making was supported by advanced predictive modeling, allowing entire populations to understand the complex consequences of collective choices. Transparency wasn't just a principle, it became the fundamental operating system of human society. Most importantly, humans developed what other species would come to call adaptive intelligence, a radical approach to problem-solving that saw challenges as opportunities for collective growth rather than threats to be conquered. The archival footage showed the results. Cities that were once environmental disasters transformed into living ecosystems. Deserts bloomed. Damaged ecosystems regenerated. Human populations stabilized not through force, but through education and collective understanding. Dr. Patel's voice was calm but carried an underlying current of pride. This wasn't just a technological revolution, she explained to her audience. This was a species-level cognitive evolution. The final image was telling: a global network of interconnected research centers, each working on seemingly disparate problems, yet somehow moving in perfect, harmonious synchronization. The Zarkax and other galactic civilizations had watched this transformation, categorizing it, attempting to understand it, but they had fundamentally misunderstood what was happening. Humanity wasn't preparing for war. They were designing a new way of existing. The Global Solutions Institute looked nothing like a traditional research facility. From orbit, it appeared as a living, breathing ecosystem, a massive complex that seemed to merge seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Satellite imaging would show something perplexing to any alien intelligence analyst. No clear boundaries between research spaces, no isolated laboratories, just an intricate network of interconnected structures that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. Dr. Marcus Chen stood before a holographic display that looked more like a living, breathing organism than a scientific instrument. Hundreds of research threads danced across the projection, each a different project, each seemingly unrelated, yet somehow perfectly synchronized. Chaos is just complexity we haven't understood yet, he muttered to his assistant, Dr. Yuki Nakamura, a biomimetic engineering specialist whose latest project defied conventional scientific categorization. On the surface, the projects looked random. One team worked on molecular reconfiguration technologies that could transform matter at its most fundamental level. Another group studied quantum communication networks that seemed to defy everything known about information transfer. A third team was developing ecological restoration techniques that could potentially resurrect entire extinct ecosystems. To the Zarkak's intelligence networks, it looked like scattered, inefficient research. They saw no weapons, no traditional military preparations. What they failed to understand was that every project was a piece of a much larger, more complex strategy. The Molecular Reconfiguration Project, led by Dr. Chen, wasn't just about changing matter. It was a comprehensive exploration of how fundamental physical structures could be adapted, transformed, and repurposed. Their current focus seemed to be on creating materials that could dynamically respond to environmental challenges, substances that could change their properties instantaneously based on surrounding conditions. In the adjacent research wing, Dr. Nakamura's team worked on what they called adaptive symbiotic networks. Their current prototype looked like a bizarre hybrid between a computer network and a living organism. Microscopic nanites created complex, self-organizing structures that could rapidly communicate, learn, and respond to changing environments. It's not about building a weapon, Dr. Nakamura explained during a research review. It's about creating systems that can solve problems we haven't even imagined yet. The ecological restoration team took this approach to a planetary scale. Led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez's brother, Dr. Carlos Rodriguez, they were developing techniques to restore and transform entire ecosystems. Their current project involved a failed agricultural region that had been considered permanently damaged. Satellite imaging showed something extraordinary happening. Where there was once barren, lifeless terrain, complex ecological systems were emerging. It wasn't just restoration, it was a complete reimagining of how ecosystems could function. Each research thread looked disconnected, but to those who understood the deeper strategy, they were threads of a much larger tapestry. Dr. Chen pulled up a comprehensive overview of their research. To an outside observer, it would look like pure chaos. Quantum communication networks intersected with molecular reconfiguration technologies. Ecological restoration techniques merged with advanced computational models. Biomimetic engineering danced with quantum physics. They're looking for weapons, he said to Dr. Nakamura, a wry smile crossing his face. But we're building something far more dangerous. And what's that? She asked. Solutions, Dr. Chen replied. Infinite, adaptive solutions. The Zarkaks were preparing for a war of destruction. Humanity was preparing for something else entirely, a war of possibilities. The colony world of New Terra hung like a blue-green jewel against the darkness of space. From a distance, it looked peaceful, almost defenseless. The Zarkaks invasion fleet, over 3,000 massive battleships strong, approached with surgical precision. Each vessel was a monument to military engineering, bristling with weapons that had crushed 100 civilizations. Commander Vornak stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Consequence, his cybernetic implants pulsing with anticipation. Historical records of 1,000 conquered worlds played across his neural display, a personal museum of military triumph. New Terra would be just another entry in that grand catalog of destruction. Initiate primary invasion protocol, he commanded, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the ship's communication systems. The first wave of dropships descended like a metallic plague. Zarkak's shock troops, genetically engineered warriors with exoskeletons that could withstand direct nuclear impacts, prepared for total ground conquest. Their battle computers calculated a 99.987% probability of complete victory within the first 6 hours of engagement. Something was wrong. As the first ships entered the planet's atmosphere, the very environment seemed to shift. It wasn't a traditional defense system. There were no energy shields, no missile batteries, no concentrated weapon emplacements. Instead, the atmosphere itself began to change. Microscopic nanites, invisible to the naked eye, swarmed around the invasion vessels. They weren't attacking. They were analyzing, transforming. The ship's weapon systems began to undergo unexpected molecular reconfiguration. Plasma cannons slowly transformed into complex light emission devices. Weapon control systems were gently rewritten, their aggressive algorithms replaced by elaborate communication protocols. On the ground, Zarkak's troops found their environment becoming increasingly uncooperative. Their advanced combat suits, designed to interface with their neural systems, began to develop what could only be described as a personality. Communication systems started broadcasting complex mathematical equations. Weapon systems generated intricate musical frequencies that induced a state of philosophical contemplation. Lieutenant Krasnak, lead assault commander, watched in horror as his primary weapon transformed into a device that seemed to be measuring atmospheric carbon absorption rates. His combat suit began to generate a detailed ecological impact report of their invasion. "What is happening?" he screamed into his communication system. The response came not from his commanders, but from the environment itself. A series of quantum-entangled communication waves began to interface with the Zarkak's invasion force. It wasn't an attack. It was a conversation. Complex data streams showed the potential consequences of their invasion. Not just military casualties, but long-term ecological, social, and evolutionary impacts. Each Zarkak soldier found themselves simultaneously experiencing potential future scenarios, a living, breathing multiverse of potential outcomes. Vornak watched from the flagship as his invasion force underwent a transformation unlike anything in galactic military history. These weren't defensive weapons. This was something far more dangerous. An adaptive intelligence that didn't seek to destroy, but to understand, to communicate, to solve. "All units," Vornak finally commanded, his voice breaking slightly. "Stand down." The invasion had failed, but not through traditional military defeat. Something far more profound was happening. Humanity hadn't built a defense. They had created a system of infinite possibility. The Galactic Concordance diplomatic chambers fell silent as Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward. She carried no weapons, no traditional diplomatic credentials. Instead, a holographic projection danced around her, a living, breathing presentation that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. "Conflict," she began, "is just an unresolved communication problem." The chamber represented every major galactic civilization. The Zarkak's delegation sat rigid, their cybernetic implants pulsing with suppressed aggression. Surrounding species, some who had been conquered by the Zarkaks, others who had long feared their military might, watched with a mixture of terror and unexpected curiosity. Dr. Rodriguez's presentation was unlike any diplomatic communication in galactic history. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't a counterattack. It was an invitation, a comprehensive analysis that went beyond traditional diplomatic discourse. The holographic display began to unfold multiple layers of information simultaneously. On one level, it showed the potential military casualties of a prolonged conflict, but this was no simple casualty report. Each potential death was contextualized, showing not just numbers, but entire life stories, potential contributions, interconnected relationships. Vornak, the Zarkak's supreme commander, found himself unexpectedly transfixed. The presentation wasn't attacking his civilization's militaristic culture. It was revealing the hidden costs of that culture in ways his species had never considered. Nested within the casualty projections were alternative scenarios. What if the resources dedicated to military conquest were redirected? The hologram began to show potential technological breakthroughs, ecological restorations, and societal transformations that could emerge from collaborative research. Dr. Rodriguez's team had spent decades developing this approach. It wasn't diplomacy as a negotiation of power, but diplomacy as a collaborative problem-solving exercise. Your primary motivation for invasion is resource scarcity. she stated matter-of-factly. The hologram shifted, revealing the Zarkak's home systems, their dying star, their depleted planetary resources. We don't just have a solution. We have multiple solutions. The presentation began to unfold complex technological proposals. Quantum energy generation techniques that could revitalize entire star systems. Molecular reconfiguration technologies that could transform barren planets into thriving ecosystems. Communication networks that could link civilizations in ways never before imagined. Each proposal was accompanied by comprehensive simulations, not just theoretical models, but living, breathing projections that showed potential outcomes with stunning clarity. The Zarkaks could see their civilization not just surviving, but potentially thriving in ways they had never conceived. Surrounding diplomatic delegations watched in stunned silence. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a reimagining of what was possible. Vornak's chief scientific advisor leaned forward, cybernetic implants working overtime to process the information. The mathematical models, the ecological projections, the technological possibilities, they were breaking down fundamental assumptions about conflict, resources, and civilization itself. "We are not offering peace," Dr. Rodriguez said, her voice calm and clear. "We are offering a different way of existing." The diplomatic chamber trembled slightly. Whether from the power of the presentation or some subtle technological intervention, no one could be certain. The Zarkak's delegation found themselves at a crossroads they had never anticipated. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was offering a complete reimagining of galactic civilization. Conflict was no longer the only option. Collaboration had just become inevitable. Deep within the Global Solutions Institute, Dr. Marcus Chen stood before a quantum resonance chamber that defied every known principle of physics. The room hummed with a complexity that seemed almost alive. A living network of technologies so advanced they blurred the line between engineering and organic intelligence. The Zarkak's leadership had reached a critical breaking point. Their entire civilization was built on a foundational belief of martial supremacy, and humanity's response continued to defy every strategic model they understood. What began as a military campaign had transformed into something far more dangerous, a comprehensive challenge to their entire worldview. Dr. Chen's current project was something that would have been dismissed as impossible by every scientific standard just decades earlier. He was developing a resource generation technology that didn't just solve scarcity. It fundamentally reimagined the concept of resources themselves. The quantum resonance chamber contained what appeared to be a small, unremarkable sphere. But this wasn't just a technological device. It was a living ecosystem of molecular interactions, capable of generating and transforming energy and matter at a fundamental level. "It's not about creating something from nothing," Dr. Chen explained to his team. "It's about understanding the infinite potential of transformation. The sphere could take virtually any input, waste materials, environmental contaminants, even the most challenging form of planetary pollution, and transform it into usable energy and beneficial molecular structures. More importantly, it could adapt its transformation process based on the specific needs of different environments and civilizations." Dr. Yuki Nakamura, his chief biomimetic engineer, was tracking the Zarkak's response in real time. Their initial aggression had transformed into something far more complex. The alien civilization was no longer simply preparing for war. They were trying to understand. Intelligence reports showed Zarkak's research teams working around the clock, attempting to comprehend the technological proposals humanity had presented. They were encountering a fundamental problem. These weren't just technological solutions. They were a completely different approach to existence. The resource generation technology was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Humanity had developed a series of interconnected technologies that challenged every fundamental assumption about resources, energy, and survival. Another team was working on planetary restoration technologies that could transform dead worlds into living ecosystems within decades. Unlike traditional terraforming, these technologies worked by creating complex, adaptive systems that could evolve and self-regulate. A planet wasn't just being changed, It was being given the capacity to change itself. Communication networks developed by another research group went beyond traditional information exchange. They were developing quantum entanglement communication systems that didn't just transmit information. They created living, adaptive networks of knowledge exchange. "We're not solving problems," Dr. Chen often said. "We're creating systems that solve themselves." The Zarkak's leadership found themselves in uncharted territory. Their entire civilization was built on a model of resource extraction and military conquest. Humanity was offering something entirely different, a model of infinite adaptation and collaborative potential. Their most advanced analysts began to realize something terrifying. Humanity wasn't just offering a technological solution. They were presenting an entirely new way of existing. As the quantum resonance chamber pulsed with potential, Dr. Chen allowed himself a small smile. The war wasn't being won through destruction. It was being transformed through possibility. The sphere in the chamber shifted slightly, as if acknowledging the profound moment of potential that hung in the air. The Galactic Archives, a massive computational complex orbiting a neutron star, contained the most comprehensive historical database in known space. For 1,000 years, humanity had been a footnote, provisional member of the Galactic Concordance, seemingly insignificant and perpetually on the edge of acceptance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a holographic display that began to unravel a story that would reshape galactic understanding. The 1,000-year provisional status wasn't a mark of weakness. It was the most elaborate preparation in galactic history. "We weren't waiting," she explained to the stunned Galactic Concordance Council. "We were studying, learning, preparing." The historical records began to paint a different picture. Every interaction, every diplomatic meeting, every seemingly inconsequential scientific exchange had been part of a comprehensive intelligence-gathering mission. Humanity hadn't been passive. They had been conducting the most extensive multi-generational research project in galactic history. Quantum communication networks revealed the depth of their approach. Each interaction with other civilizations had been a data-gathering exercise, not through traditional espionage, but through collaborative research, cultural exchange, and adaptive learning. The technologies they now revealed were not sudden innovations. They were the culmination of 1,000-year strategic preparation. Vornak, the Zarkak's supreme commander, watched in growing horror and reluctant admiration. The technologies defied every conventional understanding of scientific development. Planetary restoration systems that could transform entire ecosystems. Communication networks that were living, adaptive organisms. Resource generation technologies that could solve fundamental challenges of survival. But it was more than just technological innovation. Humanity had developed something far more dangerous, a comprehensive approach to existence that transformed challenges into opportunities. Their technologies weren't just solutions, they were living systems of infinite potential. The restoration technologies could do more than heal planets. They could create entirely new forms of ecological interaction. Communication networks didn't just transmit information. They created living knowledge ecosystems that could adapt and evolve. Dr. Marcus Chen revealed the most shocking aspect of their preparation. Every technology, every research project had been interconnected. A massive global problem-solving network that had been silently developing for 1,000 years. "We weren't preparing for war," he explained. "We were preparing to solve problems we hadn't even imagined yet." The Galactic Archives began to show the true extent of humanity's approach. While other civilizations had been fighting wars, developing weapons, and competing for resources, humans had been creating a comprehensive system of adaptive intelligence. Their provisional status in the Galactic Concordance had been the perfect cover. Too insignificant to be a threat, too persistent to be ignored. They had used this position to gather information, develop technologies, and create a fundamentally different approach to civilization. The Zarkaks had planned to conquer. Instead, they found themselves presented with a comprehensive solution to their most fundamental challenges. Planetary restoration technologies that could revive their dying star system. Communication networks that could transform their militaristic culture. resource generation technologies that could solve their fundamental survival challenges. Dr. Rodriguez's final presentation made the true strategy clear. Humanity hadn't been preparing to fight a war. They had been preparing to solve the fundamental challenges that drove civilizations to war. "We're not here to defeat you," she said to the stunned Galactic Concordance. "We're here to help you evolve." The 1,000-year preparation had been about something far more profound than survival. It had been about creating a new way of existing, a collaborative approach to civilization that transformed conflict into opportunity. The war was over before it had truly begun. The transformation began subtly, almost imperceptibly. What should have been a moment of galactic conflict became something entirely unexpected. A collaborative reimagining of civilization itself. In the Zarkak's home system, the first adaptive restoration technologies were deployed. Their dying star, once believed to be beyond salvation, began to stabilize. Molecular reconfiguration systems worked at a fundamental level, not just preserving the star, but creating an entirely new form of stellar sustainability. Vornak watched from the bridge of what was once a warship, now converted into a collaborative research vessel. His cybernetic implants, once tools of military calculation, now processed complex ecological and social transformation models. The warrior who had prepared to conquer found himself becoming something else entirely, a catalyst for galactic evolution. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood this was more than a diplomatic victory. It was a fundamental shift in how civilizations could interact. The technologies humanity had developed weren't weapons of destruction, but tools of infinite possibility. The Galactic Concordance found itself witnessing a transformation unlike anything in recorded history. Civilizations that had been locked in centuries of conflict began to see each other differently. The quantum communication networks developed by humanity created living bridges of understanding, information exchanges that went beyond data transmission, becoming adaptive learning systems that could help different species truly comprehend one another. On New Terra, the colony that had been the initial invasion target, a new form of interspecies collaboration emerged. Zarkak's researchers worked alongside human scientists, their once aggressive neural interfaces now tools of collective problem-solving. They weren't just sharing information, they were creating entirely new ways of thinking. Dr. Marcus Chen's resource generation technologies spread across multiple star systems. Planets once considered uninhabitable became living laboratories of possibility. Each deployment was more than a technological solution. It was a demonstration of a new approach to existence. The laugh that had started the entire journey, Dr. Rodriguez's initial response to the war declaration, took on a deeper meaning. It wasn't a dismissal. It was an invitation, an understanding that conflict was simply an unresolved communication problem. Alien civilizations that had watched from the sidelines began to participate. The Galactic Concordance transformed from a diplomatic body to a true collaborative network. Technologies that had been hoarded were now shared. Challenges that had seemed insurmountable became opportunities for collective growth. "We didn't laugh because we weren't afraid," Dr. Rodriguez explained in a historic address to the Galactic Concordance. "We laughed because we saw an opportunity to evolve together." The 1,000-year peace didn't end. It transformed into something far more profound, a living, adaptive system of galactic collaboration. Vornak, once a symbol of military might, now led research expeditions exploring the potential of interspecies cooperation. His warriors became scientists, diplomats, problem solvers. The Zarkak's military machine was slowly, carefully being transformed into a collaborative research network. Humanity had not conquered. They had invited. They had not destroyed. They had transformed. In research facilities across multiple star systems, a new generation of scientists, human, Zarkaks, and others, worked together. They were no longer preparing for war. They were preparing for possibilities not yet imagined. The quantum communication networks pulsed with potential. The adaptive restoration technologies continued their work. Planetary ecosystems began to heal. Dying stars found new life. And somewhere, In the vast complexity of this new galactic understanding, Dr. Elena Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. The war was over. The real work was just beginning.